By the way, Matthew, thank you so much for reading the script. This is the bravest things. People don't take it for granted what it takes for a young person to come in front and everybody's looking at you. I've been doing this for 24 years, if you count the Ox Kid, like almost. And we every time I get up, you might not see it, or maybe my knees. Story when I was applying for the seminary 32 years ago, we had to all do the entrance sermon. I don't know if you remember or not. You had to preach a sermon, write something, have an interview. So I got up to preach, and all the people who were sitting, the committee that the kind of were doing evaluation of the applicants, they were sitting sideways, and it was in Zalksky Church, and all the students and faculty, community members were sitting, listening to the new students. They wanted to know who is coming. And of course, all the faculty were sitting and looking. The acceptance committee were sitting and leaning sideways. I had a big pulpit in front of me, but the problem was the president of the seminary was an amazing man, Michael Kulikov. He had one shortcoming. Remember what it was? He was short. So they lowered the pulpit for him. So when I got up to preach, the microphone was somewhere here. But the worst case, I could not see my notes. So what I did is, what a normal person would do, I bent my knees so I can see it. And then I started getting nervous. What happens to you when you bend your knees and you get nervous? So I was preaching myself. I was the only person probably went to the seminary dancing through his own sermon, because I was doing like this. And while the people are listening and hearing me struggling, and they're probably very sympathetic, all the acceptance committee people, they were just trying not to burst out with laughter, because all they see is this. When I said amen, they were the loudest. So Matthew and the young people, I know it's very stressful. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. Every time I get up to preach, maybe you can't see it, but inside I go like this. So please pray for me. And this, of course, in the second language, it's very hard to do. Every not native English speaker has a story about preaching in English. Mine was, I had a church in Southern California, where my first church, I was there for 12 years. When I arrived there, my English was it's still work in progress, but that was just the beginning of that process. I was still struggling with a lot of things, and I came up with a sermon where I would compare Jesus, the sin and the Satan, and I talked about tentacles of sin that permeate in every aspect. You know, like octopus, they can, one of the most, they're just kind of adjusting animals. They can get into smallest of holes. They can reach wherever they want. They're very powerful. I said the Satan is a very powerful thing of sin, with the tentacles reaching and choking and grabbing and holding us. And Jesus comes and cuts the tentacles one by one, helping us in our lives. It's a very naive sermon. Today I would make it for a good children's story. It might not be a sermon. But people were, for some reason, responding very strangely, because I was really sincerely going at it, and people looking at me and looking. And I had a wonderful head elder, Lee Davis, wonderful man who became like a spiritual father to me. He's sitting in the front pew, he has the glasses, and after about me going about the Jesus cutting tentacles and going through this, understanding the seriousness of sin, he takes his glasses, and he was sitting in the second pew, and he said this for the whole church. The people are sitting at the edge of their pews, but that point is like, what is happening? And then he takes it, he looks at me, and he says, "Oh, you mean tentacles?" Pray for me. Dr. Luke takes us to the city of Joppa. As any seaport, it's a city of opportunities. I grew up in one. Grew up in Odessa, Ukraine, a seaport. Always bustling. We can think of Seattle, San Francisco, New York. Always something is happening. And the Joppa apparently became the center of trade and businesses. And if you want to be successful, you need to go to Joppa. If you want to run a successful business, you need to be in Joppa. And if you can make it in Joppa, just like they say, if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I did not know what that meant until I moved to New York a year and a half ago. And I live in Harlem. Did I say pray for me? Joppa was a city like that. And in that city, if you're making it in business, you're already accomplishing, but it also provides amazing opportunity to connect with a lot of people because people come and go and they travel far and they bring news. So it was opportunities for business, but also opportunity to spread the gospel. And somewhere in the street of Joppa, if we just close our eyes and imagine this conversation takes place. A young lady comes in a beautiful dress and she twirls around. And she says, in this dress, I feel like a princess. Another person says, well, you know, you're no princess. You're so poor, you're almost homeless. And Sapphira, let's name her Sapphira. Sapphira is a pretty common name in Palestine in the first century. Let's call her Sapphira. Sapphira says, what do you mean? And she started getting angry. It was a great day. She felt good about herself, wearing this new beautiful dress. And she started going, almost raising her hands. And then she said, no, I need to stop. She told me not to get angry with people, but to love them. Who told you not to get angry with people? You're not supposed to love people. No, she did. She told me that I need to love people. She's the same person who gave me this dress. I could never afford anything beautiful like this. This is the fashion. This is the brand. This is Gazelle number 7. Who is the person who told you these things? Who is the person who gave you the dress? Oh, her name is Tabitha. Dorcas in Greek, which translated in English as Gazelle. Pretty good name for a brand. There's Puma, there's Gazelle, there's Penguin. She was a successful business person. Who was she? Tabitha. All we know is that she was not only successful in making money, but because of her generosity and because of the impact in the community, because of the hundreds, maybe thousands of young ladies now would twirl through the streets of Joppa. She was preaching the gospel, but she was preaching with her hands. It's not surprising that Dr. Luke plays the story of Tabitha in the same chapter, in chapter 9 of Acts, probably one of the most important historical chapters in the scripture, because in the beginning of Acts, we hear the story that probably changed Christianity, if not made the Christianity, because the story of conversion of Apostle Paul. And now we start understanding that as Paul was accepted, we would never have Christianity. Theologians agree on that Jesus did not create the church. What did Jesus do? He inspired people. But who created the church? Apostle Paul. If you want to create a denomination, write a few letters and dedicate your life traveling through most dangerous places. Paul is credited to developing the most complex theology, the epistles of Rome, Corinthians. This is the fundamental principles from which we create the entire body of Christian belief in theology. We would not have Christian church without Paul, but we would not have Paul without the love and acceptance of Ananias, who took a risk of accepting this young person. And then we'll start getting idea that proclamation of the gospel not only based on the amount of information, the amount of knowledge we have, but the kind of people we are, showing the love and the kindness. It's not by surprise that in the Acts of 9, right after the story of Paul and conversion of Paul, one of the greatest theologians and philosophers in the Western civilization. You can't take a class on philosophy on the contemporary civilization without studying the work of Paul, even if you study in a secular university. But in the very same chapter, Luke wants to make sure that we also understand one very important aspect, that there's those who make the difference and preach with their hands, and they are just as valuable and important. Do we know that Tabitha, Dorcas, was the only one in the New Testament who was female, only one female, who was called a disciple? She was giving that title not because of her ability to bring the crowds with her words, but because of the thousands, maybe 10,000s of people she was able to reach with her kindness. This is the story of Tabitha. I love this passage, but I have a problem with it. Because it started so beautifully. Then it kind of went sour. Because we asked the question, why? Peter is just a few miles away in the neighboring city of Lydia, and he hears this story, and the messengers come to him and say that the Dorcas is dead. The person who made so much difference. I don't know, what could have that been? Cancer? COVID? Maybe something with her heart. She had a big heart. Maybe he couldn't take it, the stress, the responsibility. Whatever it was, the beautiful colors, the dresses, everything she created through her services, because it wasn't just clothing. I'm pretty sure she had a soup kitchen, and she had the thrift store, and she had the community services organized. She was the disciple, running and living for others. She was an outlier. Because of people like this, the world is starting to becoming a little brighter. Because she was not a good business person from a perspective that values only money, that you live and do everything for the profit. But she was one of the most powerful women of her time, and she is the only one, only female called a disciple. But now the beautiful colors and the love all starting fading to dark because she is dead. The sun seems a little dimmer, the world seems a little darker, and the people are crying. You know, our friend Sapphira, who was twirling in the beautiful dress, something is gone. Because Tabitha played such an important part in her life, letting her believe that she is human again. It's amazing what we can do just simply inviting and giving and making opportunities for people to feel human. I was involved in ministry when I was a pastor for community engagement at last year University Church. What we were doing for Christmas, we would invite all the people who were experiencing homelessness, and we would bring them to church around Christmas. Actually, it was Thanksgiving. Christmas was more children. For Thanksgiving. And we would go and bring the designer clothing, all different sizes. We had the makeup artist, and we have a hairdresser. We set up the full studio, photo studio for them. They would come, we brought the portable showers, and would invite them all. We would groom them, put the beautiful dresses, makeup, and take a picture. Do you know why they need that? Because now they can take the picture and send it to their relatives. And we would make a group pictures with them. And they would send it to their relatives who give up on them, neglected for whatever reasons. And she would say, this is me now with my friends. I said, why is this such an important thing to do for us? Because it makes them to feel human. That was Dorcas' life. But now all of that is getting darker. Dorcas is dead. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in Peter's shoes. What am I supposed to do about this? Every pastor had that phone call. I had mine too. I was called to a freeway accident where a 47-year-old father of the family of four was driving his family to celebrate his middle son's birthday. And the Land Rover flipped, and he was dead on the spot. While the ambulance was taking the family into the emergency room, I was called, and the wife said, you pray right now that the God does the miracle. Peter is on his way to her house. What is going to happen? This is an unbearable task. When we look at the world that is getting darker and darker, when we open the news, when we pick up the phone, Volodya mentioned February 23rd, 2022. I was teaching a class at La Sierra University. It was evening class. The class started at 6. By about 7 o'clock, I got a text message from my sister. He said, we're being bombed. Because the first thing that Russia did, they hit 87 targets with rockets around Ukraine. And Odessa was one of them. I'm in the middle of class. I have students sitting, and they look at me, and they ask, what happened? It got dark. I couldn't see anybody. All I could see, the darkness in front of me and the explosions. What do we do when we look at the TV? What's happening right now on our college campuses? And I know that not from a TV screen. Columbia University is only 20 blocks away from my house, and my son is a second-year student there. He has to go through this on his way to classes. He sends me his messages. What is happening? Why so much hate and darkness? And what can we do about that? If it were just left to human resources and human abilities, I guarantee you right now, no one has the answer. Who has the answer of how the war in Ukraine is going to end? So something tells me, as Peter is packing his shoulder bag, grabbing some water, we're not finding in the text of Luke any hesitation. It's business as usual for Peter. You understand the gravity he is going to earth. He is invited to resurrect a person from the dead. How would you go about it? But for some reason, he does it as a business as usual. My question, why? How? What gives him that? Because Dorcas is dead. I had my personal experience with Dorcas is dead. Did not happen 2,000 years ago, but just 20 years ago when I started my ministry in Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church in Sun City. In 1999, I arrived there fresh, 25 years old. You already know the level of my English at the time, and people were just so gracious and kind. I was told that before we go to preach, we get together in the back of the church. There is a room. Can you guess the name of the room? Say it, please. Dorcas, so you've been to the church? How did you know? I was naive and would say the word probably stupidly naive. My foolishness, because I came in and the room was full of, you're so kind and gracious. I know it's a nice church. You found a good euphemism. Because if it's yours, it's a stuff. But if it's somebody else's, it's what? Junk. The room was full of clothes. The clothes that would not be used for anything else. And we're standing there praying, just kind of find the room. And I said, oh, this is the Dorcas room. And I asked the question, who's Dorcas? Was she a member here? And then they look at me. Because in Russian translation, there's no word Dorcas in there. Only Tabitha. In translation, gazelle. Dorcas is an English New King James Version thing. Because Dorcas is a Greek name for Tabitha, which is Aramaic. That was her native name. And the reason I asked, because we had the fellowship hall that was named after Lee Lewis, who was the elder of the church. If they named the fellowship hall after the former elder, I thought maybe they named the room after like maybe a great deaconess of all time. I said, who is Dorcas? And they looked at me and said, oh, it's Tabitha. And I looked around and I said, what happened? And they said, well, a few years ago when the church started, it was a church a little younger than this church. I think this church was founded in 1955, this building in 1962. So we came about 10 years later, Valley Church. So when the church started at the beginning of 80s, when it became a thing, the women would get together and they would gossip, or they would just talk together. No, I'm being a little sarcastic. There were wonderful ladies that would get together and they would sew things, they would patch clothes, and they would distribute it. And that was their Dorcas ministry. That was their services. And I said, and then what happened to the ministry? And one of my treasurer, Harry Johnson, he says, well, they're all dead. So I was standing there, and the Dorcas is dead again. To my knowledge, the church had no connection with the community, haven't done anything for a long time. After that, I met with a lot of pastors, pastored a few churches. And I know there is more than one church where Dorcas is dead. You know what happens when the Dorcas is dead in our churches? The world gets dimmer. The colors are fading. And then the beautiful gospel message that we have is fading. So Paul has a task now, just twofold. One, to resurrect a person. But the second one, to bring back hope that is so much needed in the darkened world. But he can do it not because he's smart, because he has the energy, he has the ability, because he received good theological education. Why Paul was going there without the hesitation? Because he saw something in his life. He saw a resurrected Savior. He saw the reality and the possibility of the hope coming in the darkest of the situation. In the middle of crying and wailing. You know, the people standing and just bawling because they did not only lose a friend, they lost their hope. They don't know how they can go on. She was the inspiration. She was the soul of the community. But Peter is going there because it's the business as usual. He enters in and he goes upstairs. In the upper room, Luke tells us. There's something about upper rooms that have a special meaning. Maybe because it's opportunity to rise above the hustle and bustle and pause for a moment and to think what's the most important. And Peter asks everyone out of the room. And now he's one-on-one. I don't know what time of the day it was. Maybe, I want to picture that it was in the golden hour. It's the best time to take pictures. I want to take a good picture of this. And the sun was setting down, and the beam licked her face. And after Peter's prayer, her eyes start opening up. And she feels fantastic. Waking up from a deep, restful. Why Peter was able to do it? Because he had the resurrected Savior. He left it become part of his life. He had no hesitation to go into this, because this is what it means to be followers of Christ, to go into most unknown of the situation with a confidence, because we've seen the resurrected Jesus. This is the only key to anything that we do as church, as Christians. What is the first, I suppose, what is the thing that you would like to hear at your own funeral? What's the most desirable thing it would be to hear at your own funeral? Look, he's moving. Tabitha is moving. In fact, she gets up. I'm just imagine she asks Peter, what is this all crying outside? What's going on? What happened? Who died? And Peter wants to run out. He wants to show what happened, what the Lord can do. It's not just Tabitha is resurrected. It's the hope, it's the power of God become alive again in that community. But maybe he wants to stay there for a moment. It's soaking the opportunity to see what God can do. What God can do through the simple acts of faith. And the confidence because of what we know as Christians, what we can bring into this world that is crying, that is suffering, that is asking, that it doesn't see, that seems to lose the direction. We bring hope. My favorite part is the ending of this whole story. I'm almost done. Maybe we can have the praise team to come and help us. Because I always imagine that. Usually a surprise birthday party is when a bunch of people get together and the person whose birthday it is comes and gets surprised. Can you imagine a reversal of the surprise party? When everybody, the crowd is gathering, and the women who are, the Marys and Marthas, and, the Marthas are probably trying to fix. By the way, this is a huge challenge to preach a sermon while there's Ukrainian dinner is being cooked. I can see you looking at me going, can we speed up this a little bit? I'm almost done, I promise. I've been sitting smelling that now for a long time. Natasha told me she's going to take her heels off and go warm it all up. So that's going to be a good deal. Natasha takes her heels off, it's going to be a good lunch. So please stay. But women are preparing maybe what's supposed to be a funeral meal. And the Tabitha comes out, looks into the entire world and says, surprise. And now, instead of trying to figure out the funeral lunch, they try to see if they can send for someone for a birthday cake. And this is who we are. People who bring hope in the middle of the world that's preparing for the funeral. We're looking for a birthday cake. It's not really that hard task to do if we understand, if we make in the resurrection and the power of Jesus reality of our lives. Tabitha was able to preach with her hands. And she's inviting, her story is inviting us. And the resurrection of Tabitha is a resurrection of hope that not only happened 2,000 years ago, but it can happen today. Because I have a feeling that there's no less need today. I know this for the fact I stayed on the corner of Madison and First Ave and the Second Ave in Spokane. There's a need today. I stayed there for the last 4 days, and I saw every day young women and men. The world needs our love, church. Dorcas is not dead, and I know this because I can look into your eyes, and I know your passion. It's not the easy thing to do, but we can do it not because of our abilities, but because of the resurrected Jesus. What else to say? Surprise.